Hello dear students, welcome to the program titled as Vocational Education. Dear students, we will try to understand the meaning, history and significance of vocational education. We will also try to understand the problems in the implementation of vocational education and their remedial measures. In order to relate education with life and productivity, the concept of vocationalization of education was coined. The basic philosophy behind the scheme was that all students are not able to reach a higher academic level of education due to poverty, low intelligence and immediate need of earning livelihood, and also due to non-availability of higher education opportunities for such a huge population. Besides, in the 21st century, industry, agriculture and service sectors, they need professionals of different specialized fields, not just thinkers of BC era. Even specialized fields of today require thinking, but that thinking is always contributive to bread and butter needs of the common people in this age, and not the mental sensuality of the elite class of the past. Now let's have a look at the introduction. Through the ages, man has worked for his livelihood. He has learned through accumulated experiences how to face and control natural forces and how to live within the limited physical resources for the good of all. All this mass of rich human experience achieved through work has stimulated man to seek means and methods of increasing his efficiency in work. As a result, the method of learning through organized experiences has come into use. Apprenticeship or training under guild organization, which originated during ancient times and continued during the Middle Age, was among the first forms of organized learning. The vocational institute or school, which is relatively of recent origin, is a modern example of institutionalized learning to work through consciously organized instruction. Since the beginning of time, occupational knowledge and manual skill have, in one form or another, been transmitted from man to man and from generation to generation. This transmitting process, with its form of organization, has developed into the educational process that has now given rise to expansions and developments of what may be termed as vocational education. The diffusion of the occupational knowledge and the transmittal of the manipulative skill underlying occupations and calling of man may be interpreted as the forerunner of the various concepts of vocational education. In this broad sense, vocational education becomes that part of the total experience whereby man learns to carry on a gainful occupation proficiently and efficiently. The term vocational education, as used in this broad sense, is meant to cover both organized and unorganized methods of transmitting knowledge, skill and competencies. Let's have a look at the history of vocationalization of education in India. Vocational education continued from Vedic period to Rajput period and remained almost the same during the Muslim period. During the Mughal Empire, Indian people achieved great progress in technical and vocational fields of education. This was also a period of luxuries, which provided encouragement for production of fine arts. Many things of luxury like carpets, craft works in stone, metal and so on were produced. The most important profession was production of cotton clothes, which were exported to Burma, Malaya, Java and other countries. During the unchallenged rule of the British in India, poverty engulfed the majority of Indians. It was due to the constant exploitation by the British traders that Indian trades, industries and traditional vocations were destroyed. William Digby, a foreign traveler in the beginning of 20th century, described that nearly 10 crores of people were not getting sufficient daily food. Pointing out this tremendous decline in the condition of Indians within a few centuries, Pandit Nehru wrote in his book, Discovery of India, that the British destroyed the ancient village panchayat educational system, hundreds and thousands of schools, trades and industries of India. The British rulers were opposed to introduction of technical and vocational education because it would be detrimental for industry in England. In 1902, there were only few technical and vocational schools in India. Those were called technical schools only by name. After education became a transferred subject in 1921, technical and vocational subjects were included in curricula of high schools of different provinces. The provincial autonomy came into being in 1937, and only after 1937, expansion of technical, vocational and industrial schools started in the whole of India. By 1947, the year of independence, only 535 technical and vocational schools were in existence. This was due to extreme love for English style of living, white-collar jobs and hatred for manual work. This attitude towards technical and vocational education got changed in the independent India. It was well realized even at the time of the first Indian Education Commission, which was also called Hunter Commission of 1882, that the present system is too academic to be of material help in increasing national wealth. Mudaliar Commission 1952-53 recommended fostering of manual labor and promotion of technical skill for the advancement of industry and technology. Kothari Commission 1964-66 pointed out that the existing system of education is largely unrelated to life. In order to secure proper development, education must be related to productivity. Humayun Kabir was of opinion that the basis of prosperity of any nation was the scientific and vocational education. The examples are USA, USSR, Germany and Japan. Nearly 100 years ago, America was a pretty backward country. Russia, under the Tsarist rule, was not reckoned among the progressive countries, but now decidedly USA and Russia are the world's greatest powers. Germany and Japan suffered tremendous losses in the World War II, but soon they have regained on account of rich technical and vocational education. The conceptual evolution. The Education Commission 1964-66 also recommended the introduction of work experience should be given high priority and be integral part of general education and vocationalization of education, especially at the secondary level. The Commission ambitiously suggested that the work experience may be introduced in at least 20% of schools by the end of 4th plan and in all the schools by the close of the 5th five-year plan period. Consequently, vocationalization of education was to be a major thrust in educational reform during 5th plan period. Efforts were made both at the central and state levels to clarify the concept of work experience. It helps in forging a link between education and productivity, which is indispensable for realizing the national goals. Work experience was regarded as an effective tool of education for relating education to life. At one place in their first report, the Commission defined work experience as participation in productive work in school, in home, on a farm, in a factory, or in any other productive situation. This work experience is also very closely related to basic education. In actual practice, the productive work of basic education was restricted to indigenous craft of the village employment pattern. While suggesting the programmers of the different stages, the Commission recommended that simple handwork might be introduced to the lower classes of primary schools. At the lower secondary stage, it could take the form of workshop training, and at the higher secondary stage, it emphasized on work experiences on farms and in industrial and commercial establishments. Work experience, at least from the higher secondary stage, should result in someone earning for the student either in cash or kind. The concept of work experience developed by the NCERT in an All India seminar defined this activity as need-based problem solving, forward-looking, realistic, productive and manual. It is related to the basic needs of man, namely food, shelter, clothing, health and recreation. Meaning and concept of vocationalization of education. There are several defining and meaning of vocationalization of education or training. Most of these have arisen from traditional practices and the meaning of terms used and their implication. An examination of these will reveal the basic differences for certain practices and relationships in vocational or occupational education, which are fundamental in nature and relations and in programmers. One such concept is that vocational education is the education or training of workers. Its origin may be traced to the early apprenticeship training practices. This concept employs any kind of education or training in which a worker participates is vocational education. It also suggests that humans have dissimilar ability and the persons having neither the capacity nor the desire to study the traditional curriculum be prevailed up to opt for vocational trades, more adapted to their tastes and ability. Implicit in the concept is the meaning that working class children be trained for factory work, simply because that is their destiny. This kind of thinking does not fit in with the principle of equal opportunity. Another concept is that vocational education is the education for manual work. This concept centers on the ideas of ability to work with hands rather than mind, with a curriculum of certain manual activities like leatherwork, woodwork, metalwork, drawing work, etc. The knowledge and skills learned from such education or training just underlie mental activity relevant to the curriculum, but without relevance to specific occupational competence. This concept has resulted in the present-day practice of placing dropouts, physically handicapped, and socially disadvantaged young people in vocational courses without considering learners' interest and ability. A sizable proportion of vocational institutions, other than ITIs, in our country may perhaps be described as manual training institutions. Yet another concept of vocational education is education in certain specified subjects, which may be of vocational or technical nature, generally confined to secondary stage of education. This concept implies that a specified part of curriculum is vocational or technical, the remaining part falling under general or liberal education coverage. Here, vocational education is not designed to take the place of general education, but to supplement it. The essential merit of the idea is that the total education imparted has both cultural and utility values, fitting an individual for progressing in his chosen field of activity with inbuilt opportunity for vertical mobility. Technical high school type of education in our country is the example. Finally, there is the concept that vocational education is education for productive purposes or socially useful productive work. When the object is a product or a service for consumer use, the work involved is termed as productive work or socially useful productive work. Implicit in this modern concept is the meaning that as the individual seeks and finds new and improved ways of working through education or training, he increases his vocational efficiency. Gainful pursuits, regular occupations or vocations are becoming increasingly important in our industrialized society. Vocational education for productive work basically provides learning experience of a vocational nature, training learners to fit the requirements of a hierarchical workforce. This concept is in accord with the present-day movement of education for individual needs, education with the purpose to prepare persons who would contribute to industrial, agriculture, and commercial efficiency. This concept also leads to the theme that all education, when considered in relation to the great masses of the people of a country, must be measured finally by the single test of usefulness and utility. Education imparted in this manner should aim at the development of proficient workers as well as good citizens. Significance of vocational education. Among the basic institutions of civilized society, one of the most significant is vocation. Upon the continuing success of this institution depends the existence of all the others. The home, the state, the church, the school, and the courts of justice all are supported by the vocations of the people. If the population of a community or of a nation is improperly distributed among the essential vocations, every aspect of community or national life suffers. Furthermore, where progress of the vocation is retarded, all other social institutions are found to be unprogressive and all human level remains at a low level. Hence, it is important that every generation looks well to the proper development of vocations and that the institution be generally regarded as basic and the major concern of society. Let's have a look at some general principles of vocational education. Principles of vocational education serve a useful purpose in the delineation of policies, processes, and procedures underlying vocational education. They are derived from past experiences and judgments that have proved to be satisfactory and effective. Principle growing out of the deliberations, general agreement bodies interested in and concerned with vocational education find incorporation in the basic vocational educational laws. The general principles of vocational education are delineated below. They are established principally on the basis of rich experience and judgment of the late Dr. Charles, a leader in vocational education in the USA. Dr. Charles was acknowledged as a great authority on vocational education. Principles enunciated here have stood the test of time and they are now as valid as before. Number 1. Vocational education will be efficient in proportion as the environment in which the learner is trained is a replica of the environment in which he must subsequently work. Number 2. Effective vocational education can only be given where the training jobs are carried out in the same way with the same operations, the same tools, and the same machines as in the occupational itself. Number 3. Vocational education will be effective in proportion as it trains the individual directly and specifically in the thinking habits and the manipulative habits required in the occupation itself. Number 4. Vocational education must recognize the conditions as they are and must train individuals to meet the demands of the labor market, even though it may be true more efficient ways of the conducting the occupation may be known and that better working conditions are rightly desirable. Number 5. Vocational education will be effective in proportion as it enables each individual to capitalize upon his interest, aptitudes, and intrinsic intelligence to the highest possible degree. Let's have a look at the needs of youth and adults. The success of the nation's economy depends in no small part but on the proficiency of the nation's workers. These workers have used various means to acquire proficiency. In times past, proficiency was acquired either by pickup method or apprenticeship. The pickup method through the years has proved costly and inadequate, and the apprenticeship system is applicable only to a limited number of occupations and workers. These two methods alone will not provide the number of workers and the quality of workmanship required for the present-day labor force. So, programs are needed for the group of youth attending the full-time secondary school. The vocational courses designed for a youth who will end his full-time schooling at the secondary school level should provide this individual with knowledge, skills, and attitudes that will enable him to enter an occupation and plan and carry out the additional training required for advancement. Programs of vocational education are needed for youth and adults attending a post-secondary school, such as a junior college or technical institute, where they may secure education or training for the more highly skilled trades and technical positions. A third type of vocational training is needed for the group of young people who have left the full-time school for their regular employment. Many of them leave school to take positions requiring limited knowledge and skill. Frequently, these positions are of unemployment because of limited training. These persons require a training program that will permit them to spend part-time in school and the remaining remunerating work for self-support. A next major group in need of vocational training is composed of older adults who have been unemployed for a number of years. Many of these workers find themselves in need of training due to technological changes in industry and due to new discoveries and inventions in agriculture. Unless the training is provided, these persons may become unemployed because of their inability to meet the needs for trained workers on a competitive basis. Programmers of vocational education and rehabilitation are needed for workers who have become mentally or physically handicapped. These workers, because of their handicaps, are no longer able to follow their usual occupations and must be retained for positions in keeping with their disabilities. Need of society. Society recognizes the fact that every citizen should be equipped to contribute effectively to the welfare of the group. The highest possible welfare is achieved only when each individual produces to the limits of his maximum capacity. For this reason, the necessity for equipping each person for some occupation is a fact that even the most primitive society has recognized. Society has recognized that youth and adults need not only vocational competencies, but also general abilities. Both general and vocational education would accomplish the following. Number 1. Equip the youth to enter an occupation suited to his abilities and offering reasonable opportunity for personal growth and social usefulness. Number 2. Prepare him to assume the full responsibilities of citizenship. Number 3. Give him a fair chance to exercise his rights to the pursuit of happiness. Number 4. Stimulate intellect curiosity, engender satisfaction in intellectual achievement, and cultivate the ability to think rationally. And number 5. Help him to develop an appreciation of the ethical values which undergird all life in a democratic society. Problems of vocational education and their solutions. Number 1. Problem of creating favorable attitude towards manual work. The person engaged in manual work is looked down upon in India. Due to this reason, people opt for manual jobs only as the last option. Since vocational education is directly related to manual work, students who go for this education consider themselves to be inferior. This problem can be solved only by engaging students, teachers, and principals in manual works since the very beginning. More time should be allotted for practicals in the timetable. Number 2. Defective curriculum. Curriculum in vocational courses does not match to the local needs and interests of children. In India, where 2/3 of the population is engaged in agriculture, work experience and agricultural sciences should be the regular part of curriculum. Similarly, practicals in vocational curriculum does not stress the production of units for sale in the market. If practical is associated with the earning of the student, they will take much interest in it. This problem can be solved by raising the number of teaching and technical staff for practical works and by making all equipments available for practical work. Number 3. Problem of medium of instructions in vocational course. When a student takes admission in any technical or vocational course, he is educated in English medium because good books are not very much available in regional languages in India. It is really a problem for students, for they have generally been educated in regional languages up to high school. Thus, they have to devote much time in learning English rather than knowing the technical subjects and skills. This problem can be solved in 2 ways. Number 1. Reading materials should be prepared in regional languages. And number 2, if English medium is the compulsion, knowledge rather than language should be emphasized. Number 4, problems of administration of vocational education. Union Ministry of Human Resource Development should take full responsibility of administration of vocational education as was recommended by Indian Education Commission 1964-66. This is not the case in India. In some states, Education Department is taking the responsibility of administration, while in some states, Labor Department is looking after technical and vocational education. This problem can be solved by attaching vocational education to nearby state universities by creating a separate cell there. Every university should also have polytechnic so that other vocational colleges may be administered with the help of real experience there. Number 5, lack of research works in vocational education. Survey and research are needed to know the real utility of this education to the masses, and fundamental researches are needed to make it more fruitful to the masses. In India, the case is just opposite. We are only copying the West without making any innovation. This problem can be solved by involving the universities in research work. This will make the education adaptive to the domestic industries and agriculture. We should also make such research with the help of which we may employ our manpower to the maximum extent. This was all about vocational education. Hope you got all the information you needed, and thank you for your patience.